Mr. Speaker, I rise to make my contribution to the budget presented by the Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance on January 16, 2023, under the theme Improving Lives Today, Building Prosperity for Tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, this colossal failure and shipwreck to Guyana's economy, called the national budget, has left all Guyanese with reasons to worry and wonder about their future. Sir, some are worrying about how is it that a government can be so uncaring in its plans, policies, and programs, while some worry about when they will get out of poverty in this much touted oil economy. Mr. Speaker, a large cross-section of Guyanese is worrying about when this budget is passed, how will they survive? Where will the next meal come from? Mr. Speaker, evident to these facts is a statistical report in the Kaitor News editorial dated 20th January 2023 of the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, which shows that 43% of Guyanese can't afford a healthy diet, while 5% are undernourished. This was reported in its recent report released in January of 2023, titled Regional Overview of 2022 Towards Improving Affordability and Healthy Diets. That report also states, Mr. Speaker, that 50% of the people living in our country live in poverty. They went on to specify that half of the country's population is surviving on less than US $5.05 or Guyana $1,000 per day. Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that with these facts about Guyana, the international organization said that our country's national poverty status is the highest among the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, fix that and then come back to this August House and talk about biggest budget and budget for all people. Mr. Speaker, while this budget is some 41.4% larger than that of 2022, it is very clear that it will not be able to address the previously mentioned situations in Guyana, nor will it address the financial insufficiencies of the citizens. Mr. Speaker, this visionless government, while proposing to spend $781.9 billion, has failed to propose any measures that will indeed address the high inflation rate and general cost of living. Sir, this budget is deficient in a poverty reduction strategy, a crime prevention plan, and a permanent job creation strategy. Mr. Speaker, permit me to talk to you about public health in Region 5. Mr. Speaker, this budgetary allocation in 2 successive years continues to fail the people of Region 5, Mahaica-Borby, significantly, with some $236 million allocated to this region for healthcare in an oil-producing economy, a mere $17 million more than last year's allocation. Mr. Speaker, this government for years has failed to upgrade and build upon the work of the coalition government to transform the Trafalgar number 28 health post into a recognized health center. This is a demonstration of the gross incompetence of this administration and the lack of vision for the region. Not forgetting, Mr. Speaker, the true uncaring nature of the PPPC government. Mr. Speaker, healthcare services should be the priority or primary focus rather of any government, but instead this government is busy ensuring that our health sector is quickly privatized. Sir, the Constitution of Guyana dictates that every citizen has the right to free health services. Yet after the huge $500+ billion 2022 budget, citizens still have to purchase drugs, pay to seek medical services of specialist doctors, and yes, continue to foot the huge cost of having a life and death surgery completed. Mr. Speaker, our district hospitals in Region 5 continue to fail in their services to the people, with the X-ray unit down countless times in 1 year, the non-functioning ultrasound unit, shortages of drugs, especially for the elderly and children. The brand new one has not yet been installed, Mr. Speaker. Sir, even the dental unit was not working at Fort Wellington Hospital for a number of days until I spoke about it, Mr. Speaker. It is painful to hear the numerous complaints of residents who cannot access services at the medical laboratory at either Fort Wellington or the Mahaicony hospitals. Mr. Speaker, it is always we can do this or we can do this one, but you have to go to the other hospital to get the next one done. So you find people living in Mahaicony have to travel to Borbies for a simple test. Likewise, persons from Borbies have to travel to Mahaicony. Mr. Speaker, who will give our elderly who have to go monthly or twice monthly to the hospitals Mr. Speaker, who will give our elderly who have to go monthly or twice monthly to the money to travel when the meager pension is already consumed on utility bills, sir? The Honorable Member Jaffer Ali won't be able to know about this, Mr. Speaker, because apparently he has the Blue Shield healthcare plan, and as a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, he still doesn't live in the region. Mr. Speaker, permit me to remind this government of some of the things we called for as residents of the Mahaica-Borbies region in 2022 and still need. We need, Mr. Speaker, new ambulances, one to be added to those existing at both Fort Wellington and Mahaicony hospitals. I said this last year. In addition, 3 new ambulances which should be placed at health centers across the region at our far-flung and densely populated areas such as Rosignol, Bushlot, and Haidam in cases of emergencies, Mr. Speaker, and this is a proposal. We need, Mr. Speaker, a new state-of-the-art modern regional hospital to house all the necessary departments, sectors of healthcare services such as a functioning surgical theater, physiotherapy and radiology centers, maternity and pediatric wards, and a dialysis center. Sir, we need a fully equipped and functioning laboratory at both our hospitals. Mr. Speaker, our Amerindian brothers and sisters of Maracaibo still need a river ambulance to get them from 96 miles up the Mahaicony River to a hospital in cases of emergencies. Mr. Speaker, permit me to look at education in Region 5. Mr. Speaker, last year I denounced the meager increase of only $20 million added to the education delivery program for 2022 against that of 2021. However, this year is nothing better, with just a mere $22 million added, when this year's budget is over 40% of that of last year. Sir, while I believe that education is one of the main pillars for development in our society, this government and the regional administration do not believe it is. Mr. Speaker, if one child is deprived of education and a bright future, it is one too many. Sir, in the African community of Burma, particularly at Augsburg Primary School, the Honorable Jaffer Ali would know about this, the children in that community continue to be deprived of their constitutional rights according to Article 27. That is proper educational facilities that is required for them to learn. Sir, the Augsburg Primary School is still without electricity since 2022. The roof is leaking as if it's a strainer. Sir, the regional administration continues to prove its incompetence and lack of ability to evenly distribute the nation's resources. In 2022, Mr. Speaker, this budget included a large portion of $101 million for the rehabilitation of the schools and living quarters, of which Augsburg Primary School living quarters were slated to be repaired. But to date, sir, that building remains in a state of disrepair and no housing is provided for the head teacher of that school. Mr. Speaker, this is the state of the living quarters of Augsburg Primary School. This is the State Minister of Education of the Augsburg Primary School living quarters, fully covered in bush, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, apart from that, there was a recent fire at the Numbed Primary School due to faulty electrical works. Yes, we speak about biggest budget. Mr. Speaker, there is a shortage of furniture, inclusive of teachers' desks and chairs at several schools, including Fort Wellington Secondary, Number 8 Secondary, Rossignol Primary, among others throughout the region during the year 2022. This, Mr. Speaker, demonstrates this government's poor performance in management and gross incompetence. Mr. Speaker, when you examine the 2022 and 2023 capital project profile of education delivery, you would recognize, sir, that the classification is stated as critical. However, all these failures happened in a critical condition of our education sector. I wonder if the 2023 programs are truly critical or as the same as Augsburg Primary School. Mr. Speaker, the teachers and parents of Region Number 5 renewed a call for a separate building to house the Numbed Primary School, nursery school, and remove the children that are cramped in the lower flat of the Numbed Primary School. Mr. Speaker, this budget is vacuous, visionless, politicized, ethnicized, unfair, unethical, and benefits only the friends and elites of the PPPC to get rich and for some to get richer. Mr. Speaker, permit me to touch on public infrastructure, sea defense, and river defense. Mr. Speaker, the ordinary citizens are not mindful of the deteriorating relationship between the ministers of local government and the regional chairman of Region 5. However, sir, the effects of an unjustifiable original 2023 budget concerns them all, leaving them to suffer with little or no resources in some areas. Mr. Speaker, you would know, sir, that these proposed resources are to be spent in most areas in an unfair, ethnicized, and highly politicized manner, only catering for the communities and to benefit only the friends and families and elites of the PPPC in this much touted one Guyana. Mr. Speaker, this government returns to this House with a national budget. It failed to heed the cries of the ordinary citizens. Sir, there is a host of residents throughout the region who are suffering and need urgent repairs to be done to their streets and dams. Mr. Speaker, this government continues its rampant rage and discrimination against villages perceived to not be supporters of the PPPC government. And that's a fact, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me give you a summary of the discrimination of the Community Roads Program 2022. Sir, across 10 neighborhood democratic councils, this is the proposal of this apartheid, self-serving, racist, demonic regime. With 135 roads to be built, both asphaltic and concrete surfaces. This is the breakdown by communities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in Blairmont, Gerland, NDC, where the PPPC controls, 9 roads are to be done out of a total of 135. In Rossignol, Zeelas, where the PPP controls, 21 roads are to be done out of 135. Mr. Speaker, in Blairmont Woodlands, Bel Air Woodlands, where the APNU AFC controls, 15 roads are to be done, Mr. Speaker. But it would appear as though, Mr. Speaker, only one village is in this entire NDC, because 10 roads, Mr. Speaker, will be done in number 7 village alone, where the Minister of Local Government is from, Mr. Speaker, and the NDC is left with only 4 roads for the other villages. Mr. Speaker, surprising enough, in Bath Woodley Park NDC, out of a total of 135 roads, 31 roads will be done in Bath alone, Mr. Speaker. One community, 31 roads, Mr. Speaker. In Union Nasty Guide, Mr. Speaker, where the APNU AFC controls and has about 14 villages, Mr. Speaker. 25 roads will be done. That is good, Mr. Speaker. 25 roads. However, Mr. Speaker, out of those 25 roads, 23 will be done in one village called Bushlot, Mr. Speaker. And the Honorable Jaffer Ali would know that Bushlot is a support strong base of the PPPC, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one road will be done in Hope Town and one road will be done in Trafalgar. Mr. Speaker, every time you come to this house and you speak about the racism and the discrimination against our people, they call you a racist. But Mr. Speaker, I will remain a racist once I'm defending the people of Guyana. As long as I'm dealing with the affairs of the people of Guyana, Mr. Speaker, I will be called a racist, and I have no problem with that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in Tempe Seafield, 6 roads will be done where the AP and UFC control. In Prophet Rising Sun, Mr. Speaker, where Belladrum and El Dorado falls, only 4 roads out of 135 will be done, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, in Myconia Barry, where the PPPC controls, Mr. Speaker, 9 roads will be done. Mr. Speaker, surprisingly, in Hamlet Chance, where the APNU AFC controls, with 1 PPP village, Mr. Speaker, 1 road will be done, and that road will be done, Mr. Speaker, guess where? In the village of the PPPC. Mr. Speaker, in Woodlands Farm, NDC, Mr. Speaker, where the APNU AFC control, and we control a total of 6 NDCs in Region 5, Mr. Speaker. 14 roads will be done, sir. And out of the 14 roads, Mr. Speaker, 13 of those roads will be done in the village of the regional chairman controlled by the PPPC, Mr. Speaker. That is discrimination, Mr. Speaker. That is apartheidship, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, permit me to speak about agriculture and food security. Mr. Speaker, under this sector, I was left spellbound and speechless during the already terrifying and scary almost 6 hours of presentation by the Honorable Senior Minister in the office of the President with responsibility for finance. When he said, and I quote from page 28, paragraph 4.33, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member, I see the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs has his light on. Honorable Minister of Home Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, on a point of clarification.
Honorable Member, on that point of clarification, there's that particular standing order. I have to seek the Speaker on the floor position.
No, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister said, when we took office in 2020, the agriculture sector was in a state of collapse as it had become a target for political vindictiveness, having been starved of financial support and subjected to particularly poor planning. Sir, the minister went on to say in his budget speech, this is tragic since agriculture is an important pillar in our oil economy and has been the base of economic activity, especially in rural communities for decades. Mr. Speaker, I, like many Guyanese, find this statement laughable. Since we all know this minister throughout his almost 6 hours of vacuous presentation, found himself in the opposite corner of truth, like the rice, second paddy drying floor still to be completed in region number 5 from since 2022, and the incomplete state-of-the-art abattoir at Unfawak that is presently at foundation stage of construction, although funded started since the year 2020. Mr. Speaker, this is the state of an abattoir that was funded since 2020. Mr. Speaker, Only 2 days ago, the foundation is still being dug, Mr. Speaker. This is the rate of completion. This is the fast rate of completion that the Honorable Minister for Finance speaks about when he comes to this house. And after 3 years of spending, Mr. Speaker, this abattoir is still at foundation state, Mr. Speaker. Kudos to the PPPC government, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if the Honorable Minister wants to talk about collapse, I will direct him to his government's 2022 mid-year report. That, Mr. Speaker, is a total collapse. Mr. Speaker, when sugar declines by 55.9% in 1 year after an already reduced target, that is collapse, Mr. Speaker. When rice declines by over 22.4% with no adverse weather conditions, that is collapse, Mr. Speaker. When fisheries and aquaculture decline by 19% in the same year, that is collapse, Mr. Speaker. When livestock and meat production declines despite a growing demand for animal source food products, both locally and internationally, that is collapse, Mr. Speaker. When other crops, value crops, coconuts, corn, soybeans still can't move past the phase of studies and diversification, designs and theories after billions of dollars being invested, Mr. Speaker, that is a collapse. Mr. Speaker, when Gaisuko through this government spends over $150 million on 8 non-functional cane loaders, machines placed at Albion and Blaymont Estates, and after 2 months, not one piece of cane could be picked up by these 8 non-functional machines. Mr. Speaker, that is tragic. That is a collapse, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when this government can collect an entire flock of malnourished and in some cases barren black belly sheep and boast about this, Mr. Speaker, that is a collapse. So when the PPPC government, after investing over $40 billion of taxpayers' money into Gaisuko and can reopen one estate, Mr. Speaker, that is collapse. When sugar, Mr. Speaker, when Gaisuko, after reducing its production target over 97,000 metric tons of sugar in 2019 to a mere 57.
Honorable Member, the Honorable Minister of Agriculture is rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, a point of order, section 40. The honorable member is impeding improper motive in saying that Gaisuko would have purchased 8 cane grabber, which is not true. And I ask that you apologize and withdraw that statement.
Honorable Member, the Honorable Minister is saying the information provided is not accurate. What we will do is to establish the accuracy of that. So I'm going to ask the clerk to pull up the exact words that you said and ask the minister to provide the contrary information. Go ahead now, Honorable.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and I can provide the photos of those cane loaders. Mr. Speaker, when Gaisuko, after reducing its production target from over 97,000 metric tons, Mr. Speaker, of sugar in 2019 to a mere 57 metric tons of sugar in 2022, and still fail miserably to make a single crops target, sir, must I say to the Honorable Minister, that is what defines a collapse, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, how dare the Honorable Minister come to this house to tell us about collapsing any sector in this economy, when instead, Mr. Speaker, it was this Honorable Minister through his government in 2015 who left an entirely collapsing economy, Mr. Speaker, for the APNU AFC coalition to revive, Mr. Speaker, and revive is what the APNU coalition did, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the APNU government left a thriving agricultural sector in 2020. Today, sir, we see a steady decline in this sector under the hands of a PPPC government. This, Mr. Speaker, contributes to the rapid rise in cost of living, Mr. Speaker, in the sense that we are producing far less than we were 3 years ago and importing far more. Mr. Speaker, Don't be bothered by the noise, Mr. Speaker. The proof, Mr. Speaker, is evident in the statistics of the 2022 mid-year report, which shows that most subsectors in the year 2022 declined, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me help them to understand their government's performance. Mr. Speaker, sugar declined. Mr. Speaker, rice declined. Fisheries and aquaculture declined. Small and other crops declined. Corn and soybean declined. Mr. Speaker, this is tragic, and this is what we call a total collapse. Mr. Speaker, while this government proudly boasts about the $4 billion allocation to Gaisuco to commence the construction of the Albion packaging plant, sir, the real argument is whether Gaisuco needs a multi-million-dollar packaging plant. Sir, Gaisuco is failing day after day, crop after crop, to produce enough sugar to be processed and packaged at its Blairmont Central factory location. Sir, I ask the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, with sugar dying, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I ask the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, with sugar dying under his watch, is this feasible for Gaisuco, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, the rice sector in 2019, according to the Guyana Rice Development Board statistics, show that Guyana produced 1,049,874 metric tons of paddy, making it the second highest rice producing achievement in Guyana's history. While region number 5 alone, Mr. Speaker, produced 454,476 metric tons of paddy, with a rice equivalent, Mr. Speaker, of 295,409 metric tons. This, Mr. Speaker, was the region's second best performance, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today the rice production is at its lowest. Mr. Speaker, I repeat, today rice production is at its lowest or its worst performance ever, with the rice sector contracting significantly since 2019. However, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister comes and stands here in this Honorable House and tries to mislead the nation as if all things are bright and beautiful.
You can say the honor impute that he's tried to mislead. You have to withdraw that.
Guided, Mr. Speaker. As if all things are bright and beautiful with the rice sector. In fact, sir, the rice sector has contracted by some 22.4%, after being projected to grow by this government by 25.1%. The reality being, sir, that rice underperformed at a rate of 47.5% in the year 2022. Mr. Speaker, that is a collapse. That is a tragedy, and that speaks of a collapse in this economy. Mr. Speaker, I challenge the Honorable Minister of Finance and Agriculture to go now, and perhaps I can go with them, Mr. Speaker, and they would see that hundreds of acres of rice land have been abandoned for over 2 crops now, Mr. Speaker. Sir, rice lands in region 5 and 6, Mr. Speaker, are left uncultivated because of the high cost of living, cost of production. Mr. Speaker, the prices for fertilizers and other chemicals have all skyrocketed. Yet in budget 2023, there is no measure to cushion this, Mr. Speaker, and to assist the hundreds of rice farmers to return to the fields of their daily living. How heartless and cruel this is to our farmers, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister lamented that his government distributed $900 million in fertilizers. But, Mr. Speaker, he did not remember to report that probably all the fertilizers were spoiled and melted. Mr. Speaker, if he didn't remember, Mr. Speaker, he can ask the Honorable Vice.
Honorable Minister, use microphone. I'm not hearing you. Your own members are not paying you the courtesy of allowing me to hear you.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, standing order 40 again, the honorable member is misleading this honorable house. In Region 5, We have
Okay,
distributed.
Honorable Minister, you're standing on,
He is
you
misleading
want
the
to
House
provide
to say
contrary information. And I have to get the honorable member to give you leave to make that point.
No,
So
Mrs.
you have an opportunity, to present.
But you're lying in this house.
Right.
You're lying. You come in lying here.
Lying, misleading again, honorable members on parliamentary. Honorable member, before we recommence, honorable member Mr. Sherwin, Viceroy, I will have to get an extension for you. I did provide you with the extra time that you were interrupted. Honorable member Ms. Ali.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that my honorable member be given almost 10 minutes, but we will stick with 5 to conclude his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable member. You may proceed to conclude in 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, continuing, maybe he didn't ask the Honorable Vice President what the people in Region 6 said to him, sir, or perhaps he didn't ask the Honorable Member Jafar Ali about the one man who collected all the fertilizers in Bushlot and went to the masjid and distributed same when half of the village was left.
Honorable member, you may want to withdraw that because I am sure our masjids don't get involved in what you're trying to impede.
Mr. Speaker, so do. Went to a special place, Mr. Speaker, and distributed the same when half of the village was left at war for not receiving any. Mr. Speaker, while I don't doubt the Honorable Minister that perhaps $900 million was spent on fertilizer, I certainly doubt that 5,160 farmers did receive, as was stated by the minister. And if the Honorable Minister wants to prove otherwise, I challenge him, Mr. Speaker, to produce the list of those farmers and the quantity that they all received, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, loud shouts and long speeches with no proof of accountability is not accepted in this House, Mr. Speaker. It is unacceptable, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I challenge the Honorable Minister to show us, Mr. Speaker, to show us the farmers that received in Belgium and Ithaca in Region 5. Show us the farmers that received in Firish and Lancaster in Region 6. Show us the farmers that received in Dartmouth and Queenstown in Region 2, Mr. Speaker. And when he does, I will personally apologize, Mr. Speaker. It is high time we expose these facts of racism, nepotism, cronyism, and friendism of this uncaring cabal called a government. Mr. Speaker, with all that being said, let me remind the Honorable Minister of some of the thriving achievements in the area of agriculture that his government inherited. Mr. Speaker, improved drainage and irrigation systems across the length and breadth of the rice belt. The coalition did it. Mr. Speaker, since 2015, the NDIS installed pumps at stations across Region 5, Region 3, Region 4, Region 5, and 6, Mr. Speaker. Several pump stations have been built and rehabilitated across the coastline at a cost of over $3 billion, Mr. Speaker. The areas benefiting from this project, and listen, Minister of Agriculture, Honorable Member, the areas benefited from this investment includes Lusignan, BV Triumph, Good Hope and its environs, Friendship, Buxton, or Stelling, Mocha, Providence, Hope, and then more in Region 4, Three Friends and Columbia, Mr. Speaker, Aberdeen, Land of Plenty, Mainstay, Lima, and Reliance in Region 2, Mr. Speaker, Bengal, Gangaram, Eversham, and Joppa in Region 6, Mr. Speaker. A new sluice was built at the Edward Village, West Coast Bobbies, to improve drainage. Mr. Speaker, the coalition did that. Mr. Speaker, the introduction of a high-yielding paddy to the farming market, it was the coalition that did that, Mr. Speaker. The introduction of new varieties of fruits, such as citrus, Mr. Speaker, that the Honorable Minister can now come and include in his budget. It is the coalition that did that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it was the coalition of the APNU AFC government that introduced the Rural Agricultural Infrastructure and Development Program called RAID, Mr. Speaker, with funding from the Caribbean Development Bank to the tune of $318 million. Mr. Speaker, in the communities of Ithaca, Mocha, Monrepo, and Buxton, benefiting hundreds of single parents, cash crop, small and medium-sized farmers who now have cultivation lands and machines with the requisite infrastructure to continue a daily living. And on this point, Mr. Speaker, I say to this uncaring government, return the machines that belong to Ithaca, return the excavators, return the graders, because it belongs to the people. Mr. Speaker, the National Drainage and Irrigation Authority Commission, listen to this, Mr. Speaker, the first amphibious excavator on May 24, 2019, the coalition did that. In the GLDA Commission, Mr. Speaker, Guyana's Forest Duck Egg Tree, producing approximately 850 ducklings on a hatching day. The coalition did that. The year 2017 saw the introduction of the black giant birds to the Guyana market through the Hinterland Development Program, with the handing over of 100 black giant chickens, along with the requisite startup feed and other supplies to Madia Secondary School in Region 8. Mr.
Honorable
Speaker,
member, I've been signaling you to conclude, but you've been ignoring me.
Mr.
So
Speaker, a minute to wrap up.
no, sir. You're already a minute over the 5 minutes. So you wrap up now.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I therefore propose to this government to give unto every Guyanese what is due to them. Proverbs 29, 1 and 2 says, he that being often reproved and hardeneth his neck shall suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. Our people are mourning, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2023 is heartless, visionless, and mean, and I cannot support this budget. I thank you.
Thank you very much, honorable member. Next presenter is the honorable member and Minister of Public Works, the Honorable Bishop Juan Edgehill, starting at 11:21.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise as part of Team PPPC to support a strategic, purpose-driven, and well-orchestrated budget to continue to promote Guyana's development, bring about transformation, modernization, and prosperity for all the people of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, I'd be very concerned that NCN and DPI did not broadcast such a presentation, because that is helpful to the PPPC. That is to indicate why the APNU AFC must never, ever get back into office. That kind of presentation. But, Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate you and the Parliament, because I'm aware that everything that is said in this House is publicly displayed for all to see. And I'm sure the DPI and NCN is also broadcasting, because these kinds of presentations, which can be fact-checked, where the people of Region 5 could stand up and say, he's not telling the truth, I live there. Where the people of Region 5 would be able to say, you're talking about Travalca Health Center, we know a new hospital is being built there. Where the people who listen to the call out of roads will be able to tell you, we know where roads were built. We live on the roads where they are built. So thank you very much, honorable member, for helping the PPPC to advance its cause. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, something has been happening in this House over the last couple of days, and people have been repeating about this report released in January 2023. But, Mr. Speaker, this report was studies and research done during 2019 into 2020, during the COVID years, where people were not able to work, where they had a lockdown. Yes, it was released in 2023, but the studies were for a period when the APNU AFC held the reins of office. Mr. Speaker, I would like to bring to your attention, and Mr. Speaker, we have the report about what was taking place in Guyana during the period 1990 to 1992. I'm trying to find it back, where the percentage of people that were undernourished and the rest of it was over 22%. By the time we got it down to 11% by 2011. That is the fact, written and published. And I could send a copy of that for you, Mr. Speaker, but I'm sure you're fully aware of it. And here it is that we're having people coming to peddle narratives, big tent behavior again. Big tent behavior. I will not play Colored Girl in the Ring. So we will have to
Good morning, and welcome to day 3 of our program as we continue to follow the budget debates 2023. My name is Randolph Pritchlow. I'm joined by
Shanika Haynes.
And we will continue today our program we're doing for the last 2 days as we break down the budget debates presentation from the opposition side. Of course, we had a fiery start to the morning.
Correct.
We just listened to MP Vince Roy Jordan from region number 5. Lashes after lashes, I would say. He went on with the facts and quite upsetting to the PPP in the House. The Agriculture Minister kept jumping up about point of order and standing orders. But, quite an interesting presentation and lots of information to unpack from Vince Roy's presentation.
There is definitely a lot to talk about with your presentation. Welcome to the program, and let's get to it. I mean, you did a splendid job at putting the facts forward in a way that we could have seen the government really being upset in the amount of times they interrupted, but I just loved how even though they were doing that, you just went right back to beating the point in. I think the high point we want to start with is with agriculture. I mean, you pointed out some stuff, and if the viewers were listening to the beginning of the Minister of Public Works speech, trying to claim life. I mean, I can right away talk about the issue of Ithaca with the rate program, where the coalition government gave out all those equipment to get those farmlands back up and running and giving those persons an ease. And that, I would say, it would have been a part of, cost reduction, even with food, because they had the equipment, and you mentioned it being Randy and myself, we did a little expose in Etika where we still have footage of what happened there and all the equipment was taken away. Let's talk about that.
All right, thank you very much, Shanika and Randy. Good morning to our viewing audience. I want to start by saying that this government is cruel, heartless. The project, raid project of $318 million, which was conceived under the coalition government, benefited communities across this country. Ithaca in particular, they had machines to do all the work, from preparation of the land to harvesting and maintenance of those machines and everything. When this government took office, we had at Ithaca farms that were bearing, rice lands that were in cultivation, and of course, not 1 or 2 acres, hundreds of acres of rice. Today, as I speak, I have contact for those farmers who are presently on the ground with their farms and ensuring that they reap a good harvest. The PPPC went into that community by night, like thieves, you know?
Yes.
They go by night and they remove the machines under the disguise that MMA wants to service the machines. And they never return them. That is bullyism. That is where we call this. You speak about the discrimination. Why they didn't go to Monrepo and remove those machines at Monrepo? They chose Ithaca because it's a black community, and of course they were doing well. We had the first farmers market in Ithaca. I think it was in 2021, early 2021, where the Minister of former Minister of Finance and the leader of the opposition then, Mr. Joseph Harmon, came to open that market. And then I can find pictures of that market to show it was one of the best in Region 5. You could have had any fruit and vegetables that you think about there. Now, apart from this raid project and them being upset because the public is not fully aware that all these things were conceptualized and actually birthed under the coalition government. This government is in no way moving at any pace and real development for the people. I'll tell you why. One thing that got them upset is when I spoke about the abattoir that we designed and left in office. When they came into government, they started financing of this abattoir. Just about 3 days ago, I went to visit the site. When I visited the site after 3 consecutive years of millions of taxpayers' dollars being purportedly spent, I recognize that the foundation is still being dug. After 3 years, you see, guys, you gotta understand this. Not 3 days, 3 years, and the foundation is still being dug. Like the school, I just want to divert a little bit to talk about the school at Augsburg. The monies were budgeted, and surprisingly, under the education program, which I can show them the facts, 99% of the monies were spent, but yet still the school was not repaired and the living quarters is covered with bush. Now you tell me, where did the money go, or what project they undertook with that money? It goes to show that they don't care about a certain class and section of people. Now coming back to agriculture, under the coalition government, we saw new varieties of paddies. That is no lie. Citrus that is now in the national budget that the government cannot get past where we left, that started under the coalition government. The duck egg archery and all these things, it all started under the coalition government. When it comes to drainage and irrigation, the coalition government was in its entirety prioritizing the installation of pumps across the coastline, because if you check region 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, we installed almost 20 pumps during our state as government. That shows, and I can tell you, where I live in region 5 in Lovely Lass, that is what we call the basin of the region. So all is the lowest part of the region, and for the past 6 years we have not been flooded. It is not contribution to the PPP government. It is from when the coalition took office, and that spill over to them now enjoying tree. We fixed that problem. So flooding is the thing of the past in Region 5. And the agriculture sector as a whole, when you look at it, It is the coalition government that had the farmers at heart. It is the coalition government that ensured that despite what was happening at Gaisuko, production was still at its best. One year, 2019, in the coalition store, we saw the production of sugar in the 90s in one crop. And now in PPP government, you find that sugar production is slashed by almost 50%, and I can show you the stats.
Despite the injection?
Despite the $40 billion injection, when you can propose or budget to produce, let us say they have for one of the years 40 tons of sugar, almost 40 tons of sugar, and you only produce 4,000 metric tons, and you only produce 13,000 metric tons. Tell me what you're doing. Tell me what you're doing. So when you speak about agriculture, and I mean, it is close to my heart coming from an agricultural region. It is like my baby. And so the minister don't dare come to this house to tell us the lies and mislead the people of Guyana. When you speak about the rice region, 5 stands as the highest rice producing region in this country. And presently I go to villages, bushland, where the farmers are, despite their PPP support base, they come and they talk to me. They reach at my gate early in the morning to tell me about the situation with fertilizer. One man collected all the fertilizer and he chose to, as well as speaker didn't want me to use the word masjid, but there is where we went and he distributed all the farmers that he knows and his friends received, and the half of the village didn't receive. So even in the PPP stronghold, you find they're discriminating against each other when it comes to friendlyism, cronyism, and nepotism. And so the agriculture sector, I can boast, was transformed under the coalition government. And we are going deeply and deeply into what I would say the collapse, as the minister mentioned in his speech. And that's why I took him on, particularly when he spoke about the collapse, because the sugar declining by 57%, with with rice declining by 19%, and even the projects that they started with coconut and all these things, they have not yet moved past that which is on paper. They have not yet moved past the theoretical part of it to say to the nation, well, okay, we have planted so many roots of coconut and we harvested, or in 2 months we'll be harvested. They're still telling us by book or by paper that we will do and we will do. But the proof of the coalition is there to show.
I wanted to, as you mentioned this idea of collapse, and you made a point to recount all of the failings of this administration as it relates to agriculture, and you can kind of rehash that for us, because people need to understand that it's only because we have been fortunate with oil that this economy is holding up. And if you can take us through those non-oil sectors that have collapsed under this administration.
Yes. Well, let me just get the stats, because I believe that when you speak to our people, you must let them know that which is true. And apart from them knowing that which is true, it must be the present day information. And when I quoted or where I spoke from, is the PPPC mid-year report.
The Bank of Guyana.
The Bank of Guyana approved this mid-year report. It was sent to all the sectors, all the members of parliament. I don't need to lie about this. And so the mid-year report told us that sugar declined by 55.9%. The mid-year report told us that rice declined by 22.4%. The mid-year report also, and if I specify to you, with sugar declining by that 22.4, and for the underperforming by what they projected, sugar in total underperformed by 47.7, rice in 2022. Further to that, fisheries declined by 19%, and fisheries and aquaculture, it's a big thing within our non-oil economy. And so when that declines, when you look at livestock and meat production, it all declined in despite of us having a demand for animal source and meat and food products, both locally and internationally. When you look at other crops, and if people not understand, when I say other crops and value crops, the budget specifically dictates that, so we have to address it. When you look at those cash crop farmers, those small farmers doing specialized farming, shallow celery, different things, sweet pepper and so on the market. Those crops, including coconut, corn, soybeans, they are failing miserably. When you go on the market, you recognize that borrow that we plant right here has skyrocketed.
Yes.
Shallot that has been planted right here has skyrocketed.
Which is a fast-growing thing.
Exactly. And apart from that, sweet pepper is another. And apart from that, the others such as the coconut, the corn, soybean, they can't move past the study. Why are we still studying after 3 years? You have this in your budget for years, but you're still studying it. You need to move to the stage of implementation. Now, apart from that, the minister was quick to stand up to defend 8 cane loaders that were bought by Gaisuku and are non-functional. Look, when it's a gift and they had to just pay a little thing, you cannot accept, man, 8 cane loaders that cannot pick up cane in this modern age. 2 months and the loaders have not yet worked to pick one bundle of cane. You know, the sugar workers. I come from Gaisuku. I'm a Gaisuku apprentice, trained and worked with the sector for 4 years. So I know the people throughout the Gaisuku sector throughout the country, and they understand that I know about sugar. So they will call me and they will talk to me. I worked at the Blaymont Central Factory. I worked at the Albion Central Factory. I worked at IFLA. When you look at these things, you will understand also that this government collected a flock of black belly sheep, they call them. These things are malnourished. I mean, it's a shame to speak about it. Don't call it gifts that are not beneficial to our people. They are malnourished, and surprisingly, some are barren.
Wow.
The sheep, they are barren. In addition to that, this government invested, and we all know that, over $40 billion in Gaisuku to date. Another $4 billion is there to be passed in a few days. With this government investing the $40 billion, look, that could have given public servants some 20 to 30% increase on their salaries by now. 97,000 metric tons was the target for sugar in 2019. In 2022, it is 57,000 metric tons. Now, you would want to believe that with it being reduced significantly, they will achieve it. But no, 2 crops in 2022, and they still fail miserably. They have not yet achieved it. And so I say all these so that the public can understand that when this government and the minister comes to tell us that we left a collapse in agriculture sector, no, it is far from the truth. This is what collapse really looks like. This is what it means, you know.
I know. Go ahead.
I think that I heard the speaker saying he will give the minister an opportunity to comfort, you know, to bring some information to maybe say whether you were wrong or whatever it is. But it's so funny. I like that you made it clear that what you have listed there came from the media report. And as we sat and listened to the minister responsible for finance presenting, he declared all the sectors that would have declined. He said it is in the record.
But you know what is surprising is that when you reach the sectors, I don't know if you paid attention to that, when you reach the sections that the sectors rather that decline, he tried to paint this glorious picture by just camouflaging. He just you know, walked past it nicely, quickly. And so he tried to show us that all things are bright and beautiful. So he misled the country. So the statistics coming out now to the people had them, you know, worked up, and the agriculture minister even stormed out of the assembly. He left because he could not understand how this boy coming out the facts.
Or maybe, you know, he didn't get a chance to, you know, double check what was given to him to know, yo, this is what you actually said.
Exactly.
You also hammered in on the issues in Region 5, and part of what bothered the Minister of Public Works was you talking about those roads. Let's talk about that.
Look, the roads that I spoke about, it is clear to all Guyanese by now that the PPP discriminates against those who are not supporters of them. When we take, for example, in Union RC Guide, and I must say it very early, that in Region 5, we control 6 of the 10 NDCs. In Union Narstigai, 25 roads were proposed to be, as a matter of fact, they were already awarded. So the case is that they're going to be building 25 roads. Out of the 25 roads in an NDC that has about 14 to 16 villages, one would have believed that you would have spread the 25 roads, probably 2 per village or 3 per village in the most critical areas. You find that 23 of those roads, 23, and I can produce the document. I can show them where I took it from. 23 of those roads will be built in one village, which is Bushland, which is of course 100% Indo-Guyanese, which is of course 100% PPP supported, and by far they're stronghold. But in Hopetown, one road will be built, and that is the School Street. In Trafalgar, one street will be built, that is in again the School Street. But my point here is that the PPP must admit that there are a bunch of racist people in the government, and then when you present your budget contributions, you might not understand from outside what really happens. You're being heckled and called a racist, a thief, and a murderer, and a cheat, and a lie. They call you all these names. But I said to them today, if it means that I would be called a racist to defend the will of the people, to defend the needs of the people, to defend what is right for all our people, I will accept the name of a racist. Because how can you explain to Guyana when you're doing 25 roads in Bushlat alone, and 23 roads in Bushlat alone, and 25 roads are slated in that one NDC?
How many communities in the NDC?
14 to 16.
Wow.
Look at it. It's only 135 roads that will be built. Now, when you take 25, and you take out of the 135, then you go to Bath Settlement, which is another NDC that they control. In that Bath Settlement alone, 31 roads will be built in Bath Woodley Park.
Understand? 56 PPP, 2 PPP villages.
So understand that in 2 PPP villages alone,
almost more than half
in the region, more than half of the roads will be done. Then to crown it off and it take you past half, you go to Rosignol, Zealous NDC. Again, PPP control. They are doing, I think it's 19, it starts today, to 21 roads in that community. So you see there now, you're way past 70-something roads. And out of the 70-something roads, which takes you to a position that you can conclude half of what they're doing is in 3 PPP villages alone.
Yeah.
Come on.
The allocation.
So
it's glaring.
It's glaring. It's glaring. And that is why, if they could have gotten to me during my presentation, they would have gotten to stop me.
Yeah. I want to, as we take a quick look at what's happening on the floor for those viewers before we wrap up here with MP Vince Roy Jordan. Ejel is still on the floor. I think he has a few minutes before we wrap up. Let me ask you this question, though. As you consider the budget, you said the budget is cruel, and you have, you've characterized it in this manner. You're a representative from Region Number 5 as a young MP, right? You're also the vice chair of the PNCR, and a role model for other young people. And as I look to this budget, I don't see anything for the young people. I don't see any way forward for the young people. I see any programs or plans that will help to move them in the right direction. I've been asking this question of MPs as they come. Do you believe that the young people in your region want to go into the sugar industry? I heard Kemrad say cutlass and punt mentality. And is there any program you see that this government is putting forward to move those young people into the jobs of the future?
Look, Randy, thank you very much for that question. It will help me to bring out this point. I mentioned in the early stages of my presentation that the government has no crime reduction or prevention strategy in its budget. The government has no permanent job creation strategy in its budget, and there are no measures that can really address the current situations, both Gaisuku, high cost of living and all of that, generally in this budget. But I want to answer the question in this way. The temporary jobs that the government are boasting about in their budget presentation, it is clear that it is just an election gimmick. It's a game. $10 billion put aside to employ these young people, middle age, what have you, to work for 10 days for $40,000, no NIS security, no pension scheme, no PAYE, nothing that is meaningful. As a matter of fact, for the next 10 days, they're just walking around waste. I know of about 20 young people so far that has quit, completely quit. They said they can't, it doesn't make sense. They just went back to workshops and so on, in private workshops in the community, and they went to work. I would want to put it this way, I'm no economist, but I would say if I take that $10 billion, let us say they're employing 10,000 workers, and we employ 5,000, because we can pay them minimum wage. We can pay them minimum wage of 75, 80,000, because it's ugly. And you pay them that 5,000 permanent jobs, find sectors and areas to put them in. Year by year, we are removing 5,000 young people or persons from the line of unemployment and bringing them into permanent employment and have a strategy of continuous employment. Now you continue every year with this 40.
And even if you
it doesn't make sense.
I agree with that, because even if you bring them on the contract, they are getting a gratuity. If you bring them permanent, they're going to have their allowances and the benefits.
That's right.
So it makes more sense than this, what you have here.
And talking about Gaisuku, I came from Gaisuku. And going back into Gaisuku, young people do not want to go into a sector that is not progressing. Because Gaisuku, when I knew it, had about 7 operating estates. And it was, I would call it the glorious days. But now you find that Gaisuku cannot afford to do what it used to do years ago. And so the skillful measures of right-sizing the estates, ensuring that the mechanization system that we had planned is put in place, would have carefully brought on those young people who are going to the technical institutes, the University of Guyana, and the other schools that we have that are more trained in the advanced level, not cutlass and fork and shovel and these things. Because as we speak, some countries around the world, they have mechanical cane harvesters. And so in that sector, that area, we can employ those who got to fix the cane harvesters, those who got to operate them, and the different servicemen and the like, those who got to supervise. So immediately you're creating a new realm and a space where you employ new people. That is what the vision we had in mind for the agriculture sector, Gaisuku in particular, with right sizing. But when you just keep the estates open and the minister will come and boast about some 1,100 workers they now employing back at Rosal, which is quote unquote, I don't know if it is true, but the 1,100, the people did not go for the job because they're telling them about cutting cane, they're telling them about weeding. I mean, this has to be done, but we are moving away from that. We are moving away from that. And so the reality is, this budget has nothing for the people of Guyana. This budget has nothing for the elderly. I have to represent our elderly. Don't come and tell me they don't pay water rates and they don't pay electricity bills and all these subsidies. One pensioner, what our pensioners don't know about Facebook and TikTok and the likes.
Correct.
When you have to get DSL and fiber internet, added water, added electricity with the excess that they have to pay. Medical bills alone, when you go to the hospitals, you can't get free medical services because when they give you a prescription, you're left with 2 of the drugs, you got to buy the other 3 at the pharmacy. And so totally the budget will not meet the needs of the people, like I said. It will not fully meet those insufficiencies of our people, financial insufficiency of our people.
As we
Definitely.
wrap up, I
Yeah, go ahead.
want to give you the opportunity. I know you had to rush your close there because, of course, of the time. I want to hear that scripture again.
There was a-
I know it from my head, but let me quote so that I don't make. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
And every year, mind you, when I come to the house, I always leave a scripture with my good friend, the man of the cloth, Bishop. Oh my.
Yes.
He's closing up there.
Bishop Ejil, so that he too can be able to, repent of his sins and seek forgiveness and understand that God is still supreme. You just don't talk about this God and you just come here and you do to the Guyanese the things that you're doing. And we must be mindful because what the scripture tells us, we live by, and then God will one day deal with us according to that. And so I said in closing, according to Proverbs 29, 1 and 2, he that being often reproved and hardened his neck shall suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. 2015 to 2020, people are rejoicing.
Yeah.
But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. It is simple. With our situation in Moko, people were mourning, and we still are mourning. When you kill 2 Henry cousins, people are mourning. When you move to Quindon Bacchus on the East Coast, people are mourning. When we check the newspaper and we see crimes and crimes day after day, people are mourning. And look, this is an entire episode by itself.
Yeah.
The people are mourning and suffering because of the rule of those who are ungodly in this nation.
Wicked.
And I have no apologies for that. The wickedness causes all of us to suffer. And so I told them this on my maiden presentation in 2020. I left the scripture with the Honorable Bishop, and I was pushed again by the Spirit to say to them to repeat it, because I know for a fact that their time and their days are numbered, and very soon they shall be no more.
Right. On that note, I think we can round off this segment. We want to thank the MP for coming in and unpacking a lot of what you would have mentioned on the floor of the house there. We will definitely continue to talk with our MPs. I know you have to head back to the house to support your colleagues. Thank you very much for that, MP. And we are going to be continuing our program here as we break down and we unpack all that is happening with budget presentations, budget 2023 debates. It is day 3, and we will take you back to the floor now.
Well,
Go
just
ahead.
before we take them back to the floor, just to give a lineup,
Yes.
we have coming after the person on the floor, our MP will be Mr. Roysdale Ford, who will obviously be dealing with the legal affairs and matters, and I'm sure he'll touch a bit on the general things. And he will be followed by Ms. Dawn Hastings Williams from our side, who of course will be dealing with Indigenous affairs matters. And she will then be followed by Ms. Geeta Chandan Edmond, who will be dealing with governance, I do believe.
And public security.
Public security as well.
And then Devin Sears.
Then we have,
tourism, and then we have Ms. Cummings, who is dealing with health. And then, of course, we have Ms.
Beverly Alert.
Beverly Alert.
And she'll be dealing with, I think, some of the local government issues as well. So there is a good lineup here today for us.
Definitely.
As you will continue to join us. I know last evening we wrapped up with MP Marine Philadelphia.
Yes.
And we will try to get her, and I think we missed 2 other MPs from yesterday that will be joining us
today.
And as we go through their speeches as well and have, a further in-depth conversation on the issues raised at this budget debate.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, we'll be of course, bringing you presentations from the opposition side of the House. At the moment, Minister of Public Infrastructure,
Public
Works, sorry, Bishop Edgehill is on the floor. And as I said, you aren't missing anything, so don't worry. But we'll join him for his last few moments on the floor, and then we'll head straight into Roysdale Ford.
Ali and the other cabinet, guiding the Ministry of Public Works, we will continue to do all that is necessary for the modernization, transformation, and development of Guyana. And our commitment, sir, is to serve all the people without discrimination. We will not be manipulated by criticisms to give preferential treatment to prove any point to anyone. We will continue to work with our objective criteria in ensuring that in the delivery of services, people who never had, people who never benefit, and people who didn't benefit will now begin to benefit first while we bring benefit to all the people of Guyana. I thank you, and I pray that we will have a successful year 2023. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Edgehill. And now for the Honorable Member, Mr. Senior Counsel, Mr. Roysdale Ford.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today cognizant of the expectation on our shoulders from those who sent us to this honorable house to represent their interests and ensure that as Guyanese, that they all can benefit from the nation coffers based on need and the creation of opportunities, utilizing the principles of equity and equality. We may be on opposite sides of the house, Mr. Speaker, because of who elected us as their representatives, but I can assure you that the ordinary Guyanese represented on both sides of the house desire to be an equal part of society and benefit likewise. This is not only a task, but a responsibility which we must deliver without fear, favor, or ill will. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to do this in earnest and due diligence, because a country this wealthy has no excuse not to deliver in equal measures to all the people. The budget is serious business. It ensconced the financial management of the country for 2023 and what measures or lack thereof government has provided as a pathway or a hindrance, particularly for the ordinary Guyanese man who rely on us to create opportunities for them to thrive. We are reminded by Derek Hamilton, Professor of Economics and Urban Policy, that there are other ways, and I quote, to define economic value and traditional measures have not captured what is first and foremost our most treasured asset in the world, which is people. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, critical examination, assessment, and dissection of this budget in relation to the rights, needs, and welfare of all Guyanese are imperative before arriving at a decision whether this budget is national or partisan. Mr. Speaker, some 43 years ago, the nation transitioned from a constitution given to us by our former colonial master to a constitution which was indigenous and reflective of the aspirations, hopes, and ideals of all the Guyanese people. Indeed, we would recall that no one other than Dr. Cheddi Jagan himself declared that he found nothing really wrong with the 1980 Constitution. Articles 24, 26, and 27, for example, confer the right of free medical attention and social care in the case of old age and infirmity, free education from nursery to university, and the right to proper housing accommodation. Mr. Speaker, the constitutional commitment to social and economic rights, as stated in the aforementioned articles of the Constitution, were never intended to be barren, sterile, or arid legal provisions.
They were meant to be state obligations which underpin the nation of Guyana. In 2016, Mr. Speaker, the Partnership for National Unity signed the oil production sharing agreement to ensure and guarantee a prosperous and stable economic future for all the Guyanese people. Despite the PPP much maligning the oil production agreement, it is the basis of the economic growth that the PPP now seeks to falsely claim as its own and is now grossly mismanaging. What is really owned by the PPPC, Mr. Speaker, is a grave deterioration in the quality of life of most Guyanese, increased poverty, increased hunger, low wages, high crime, ever-increasing unemployment, especially among the youth, low pension, malnutrition, and little or no meaningful attention to the elderly, aged, and infirm. However, Mr. Speaker, the PPP budgets certainly have one thing in common. That is the failure to introduce a vision and a plan for all Guyanese, consistent with our motto of one people, one nation, one destiny. Mr. Speaker, they expose the ugly underbelly of structural discrimination, evident in the growing income gap between the haves and the have-nots, the few beneficiaries of the PPPC's One Guyana and the vast majority of Guyanese. The economic decay is reflective of the decay in the quality of citizens' legal rights and their opportunities to access for their own economic empowerment. It remains today, Mr. Speaker, relevant as stated by Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham in his speech, A Vision of the Cooperative Republic, that this nation must be cognizant, and I quote, of social needs and wants in creating a just society for the people of Guyana, end of quote. He stated also, Mr. Speaker, that a just society cannot be achieved unless the majority of people, the masses, the little men, have a full share in the ownership and control of the economy. Mr. Speaker, apart from the PPPC's One Guyana, the majority of the people, the masses, the little men and women have not benefited from the oil economy, nor have they seen their quality of life positively impacted. Since 2020, the economy has grown. It has grown, Mr. Speaker, 43.5%, 20.1%, 62.3%, and projected to grow in 2023, some 25.2%. But it's amazing, Mr. Speaker, that the Honorable Minister has been unable to point to any ownership by the little men and women and their families in the ownership and control of the economy. We call upon this government, Your Honor, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that the government provide mechanisms for ordinary Guyanese to own and control the economy. The stable inflation rates from 2016 to 2020, despite high levels of economic growth under our side of this Honorable House, saw greater spending power of the Guyanese people, greater rates of saving, and lowering of poverty. To this, the nation owes and holds gratitude to the prudential stewardship of the former Minister of Finance, Winston Jordan, President David Granger, Prime Minister Nagamutu, and the ministers of that government. Mr. Speaker, inflation has rapidly increased under the PPPC from 2020 to 21 when compared with the APNU's period of governance. In 2016 to 2020, inflation was 1.4%, 1.5%, 1.6%, 2.1%, and 0.9% respectively. During the PPPC's period, Mr. Speaker, it's recorded as 5.79 and 9.4 in 2021 and 2022, respectively, and is expected to be 3.8% in 2023. Mr. Speaker, the high inflation and high prices are wreaking havoc in this country, and this government must bear full and accept full responsibility for this. The PPP budget offers no prospects for equitable economic and social transformation, which is now more necessary than ever for the people to prosper in an economy identified as the world's fastest growing. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister, in his budget presentation, omitted to provide us with any information on the human development of the Guyanese people. I submit that the deteriorating quality of life of most Guyanese since 2020, the minister thought it prudent in this oil-rich economy to hide the facts. But facts are stubborn and cannot be hidden. Mr. Speaker, you would have heard how perturbed they are when we mention the Food and Agricultural Organization report. They want to say that it's a report done during the period of the APNU AFC. But Mr. Speaker, what cannot be denied is that for the last 31 years of government in this country, these fellas over there have been in government for 26 years. The problem is their failure to effectively.
You know better. These fellas over there.
Sorry, Your Honor. These honorable fellows, Your Honor, these honorable members have been unable to effectively deal with the issues, Your Honor. That is why, Mr. Speaker, the report says that around 43% of Guyana's population cannot afford a healthy diet. Mr. Speaker, they may not like it, but this is the fruits of their governance for 26 of the last 31 years. Mr. Speaker, this certainly isn't the quality of life any caring government would desire for people or flippantly speak about. Guyana, the PPP is spending billions on infrastructure and has forgotten our struggling working class, single parents, youth, ordinary families, farmers, fisher folk, the elderly, our brothers and sisters in the indigenous communities. Our people are suffering under the heavy rising cost of living caused by this government with their poor fiscal policies, tearing into every pot and pan of every Guyanese home across the country. This government has become disconnected from suffering families, and this can be seen in the more than 100-fold increase in prices for the period January to December 2022. Ordinary items, Mr. Speaker. Cabbage has increased by 130%, pumpkin by 185%, eddos by 150%, eggs by 82%, boras by 183%, pak choy by 166%. This is what the Guyanese people are facing. The facts, Mr. Speaker, the prices of basic commodities have increased at a pace that now outstrips income of any sort, whether salary, whether wages, whether pensions. Social and economic equalities are increasing for the vast majority of Guyanese, yet the budget has failed to address these. This must be a source of shame on the president, it must be a source of shame on the finance ministry, and certainly a source of shame on the government. What the honorable minister has failed to address also in the budget is Guyana's score on the Human Capital Index, which reveals some frightening matters, Mr. Speaker. It discloses that 97% of our children survive to age 5. Increasing levels of non-communicable disease contribute to only 79% of our 18-year-olds potentially surviving to age 60, with only 3/4 of our 15-year-old boys reaching 60. You would agree, Mr. Speaker, these are disturbing statistics. The health and longevity of our people are critical for the nation's development. Likewise, the survival of both sexes to ensure procreation, family stability, and growth. 12% of our children under 5 suffer from chronic malnutrition, twice the rate in the interior of Guyana. The maternal mortality rate is now 229 per 100,000 live births, one of the highest rates in the region. The healthcare professional to population ratio is 31 physicians and nurses to 10,000 of our population. Suicide rates continue to be high, with Guyana still having one of the highest rates in the Caribbean, 30.2 suicides per 100,000 persons. We on this side of the House believe that the government must increase in real time and real terms allocations to education and health, and these must be directed to the quality delivery of necessary resources, training, and recruiting competent personnel. Mr. Speaker, the recent announcement by the government that it is against the cash transfer because it cannot afford it has no basis in evidence other than the partisan desire to keep the poor, vulnerable persons from benefiting from our oil wealth, therefore increasing the poverty gap. Cash transfers must not only be paid to the poor and vulnerable based on needs, but to every household as recommended by Guyana's and the regional's premier labor economist, Professor Clive Thomas. The PPP, despite rapidly worsening the economic circumstances in Guyana since 2020, decrease in poverty and the abundance of oil resources, have failed to expand and overhaul the social safety net. The government must at once provide unemployment grants, establish a social safety net that addresses the circumstances of young children, young persons, elders, and women in our society. Mr. Speaker, among the travesties still occurring in Guyana is the persistent failure by the government to make wages and salaries livable and to respect the constitutional right to collective bargaining for all unionized workers in the public service, or where the government is a shareholder. I believe this government must act now and move to the bargaining table with the trade unions to achieve increased wages and salaries and improve conditions of work reflective of an oil and gas economy. The government has failed to deliver on its elections campaign promise of a 50% increase to all public servants after more than 2 years in government. Unilaterally tossing less than 20% increase in wages and salaries to public servants in 3 years is as discriminatory as it can get. In 2020, public servants received nothing. In 2021, they were tossed a 7% taxable increase. And in 2022, an 8% taxable increase. This is unacceptable. What is needed for the small man in this country, Mr. Speaker, is a helping hand up, not the government's boot on his neck. Mr. Speaker, when the government boasts of development to the people, this development is meaningless if it is not accessible to our people. In instances where the government is seeking to establish housing development, citizens are being asked to pay exorbitant sums of money on unlivable wages and salaries. The locations of these areas are far removed from persons' workplaces and their children's schools. Persons also can't get to locations where these houses are going up neither because they cannot afford to purchase a car. It is a situation of one step forward and many steps backward. The situation will get worse if we do not value the importance of progressive infrastructural development and building communities which are accompanied by the requisite amenities and services. And even though we are seeking to break free of poverty by the seemingly supportive opportunities that exist, they remain shackled by policies that do not empower them either. Mr. Speaker, I believe that we can afford to build quality houses for the ordinary Guyanese man and woman. The construction of these must come from small contractors, primarily the marginalized communities of our society. This is a plan that will give the small man an opportunity to escape poverty. The government is also facilitating the massive transfer of state wealth and awarding huge contracts to the identified One Guyana. Flagrant disregard for the public sector workers and the vulnerable in our midst continues despite evidence of the vast economic disparities and the repeated advice to pursue political inclusion and shared prosperity. Even the Joe Biden administration had urged this government to act responsibly. In the world's fastest growing economy, the government ignores that 49% of the people are living in poverty. 48% of the population is existing on less than $1,200 Guyana dollars a day. And it is in this Guyana that pensioners are expected to survive on $33,000 per month with today's cost of living. These groups, which represent the majority of Guyana, get no direct benefit from living in the fastest or the fifth fastest growing, depending on what the president says, economy. Only the One Guyana, that special One Guyana, is benefiting from this growth. Mr. Speaker, this budget is anti-family. It has given the small man nothing, nothing to survive on, nothing to live on, nothing to hope for. As families are stretching themselves thin on small incomes, the government has been withdrawing billions from the Natural Resource Fund. But these sums have had no direct impact on the ordinary lives of the people. 3 times last year, the government dipped into the fund. In May, for $200 million was withdrawn. In July, another $200 million. And this month, $207.6 million. In 2022, Guyana earned more than $1 billion in oil and gas revenue, more than $150 million in royalty, and the economy grew by more than 60%. By no stretch of the imagination, Mr. Speaker, is Guyana a poor country, but yet poverty is pervasive with a widening economic disparity and government indifference. My fellow Guyanese, we would like the government to address its mind, assuming it has a mind and a heart, to the philosophical underpinning of Aristotle's theory, and I quote, "Poverty
is the parent of revolution and crime. Aristotle is referenced, Mr. Speaker, merely to direct attention to the causative effects of deprivation and what we must do as representatives of our people to address this. The reappearance of street executioners and extrajudicial killings are symptomatic of the social decay and the return of the breakdown in law and order. Mr. Speaker, these indicators do not augur well for the stability of our people and our beloved country, Guyana. 2 days before the budget presentation, Guyanese were shocked at the news of the gunning down of Delon Josiah at his home, in his bedroom, at Perseverance on the east bank of Demerara. Days earlier, Anthony Charles, called Skiddy, of Leopold Street, was gunned down in broad daylight. This assembly cannot ignore these untoward happenings in our streets, either by rogue officers and or by civilians, threatening the safety and security of us all. It is not the national development, Mr. Speaker, when the PPP continues to ensure that significant and transformative projects are only landed in their geopolitical strongholds, a continuation of what continued and obtained during the previous terms in office. Guyanese are aware that the hospitality training complex is identified for Port Moran, the gas to shore at Wales, the packaging plant in Edmore, and the list goes on and on. There will be no similar economic transformational projects, as far as we know, slated anywhere near communities represented and dominated by supporters of the opposition. This is the president's One Guyana, and this should certainly offend our sense of national consciousness. The largest budget in the history of the nation deliberately avoids meaningful funding to the predominantly Black civil service and discipline services. I can say more, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the attention is now going to be directed to the travesty in Caneview, Mocha, in which the police was used by the executive of this country to prevent their fellow Guyanese from protecting their homestead and belongings. It's beside the point, Mr. Speaker, whether they were asked to remove or offered support to move. Mr. Speaker, will the other side of this assembly initiate this very public policy to clear the Grove to Diamond East Bank reserves, which will ease traffic congestion in the East Bank corridor? This legislature, this lawmaking branch of this government, in which sits the executives, members, knows that homeowners, be they described as squatters or otherwise, have rights. No government should demolish persons' homes and properties without engagement, providing them with comparative opportunities for relocation and securing their hard-earned possessions and investments. Mr. Speaker, the United Nations Commission on Human Rights, the Subcommission on Prevention of Discrimination and the Protection of Minorities report illuminated the 12 misconceptions and misunderstandings of the right to housing. The report dispelled the notion of squatters being criminals and unworthy of meaningful engagement and respect. Indeed, our Constitution, Article 154 of the Constitution, demands and calls upon every state organization to respect the rights arising under international treaties. Lest it be forgotten, we were elected here to represent our people, and this representation must be to the benefit of all the Guyanese people. The PPP continues in this regard to fall woefully short. The government's inattentiveness to the people is also reflected in its treatment of the judiciary. Not only has President Irfan Ali failed to respond to the Honorable Leader of the Opposition's, Mr. Aubrey Norton's letter, agreeing to the substantive appointments of Mrs. Janet Cummings Edwards and Mrs. Roxanne George Wiltshire Senior Counsel as Chancellor and Chief Justice respectfully, consistent with Article 127 of our Constitution, he has failed to ensure that the judiciary has been conferred with the required human resources to dispense justice in a timely manner. Initiation by the President of the required consultation with the Leader of the Opposition for the appointment of confirmed officers must happen forthwith. Mr. Speaker, the judiciary demands immediate attention, and I believe the dilly-dallying must end. The situation is dire, and the government's dereliction of duty was politely addressed by the acting Chancellor, Justice Cummings Edwards, when she said, and I quote, "We need more judges. We need the Judicial Service Commission to be established ASAP as soon as possible. We are facing increased caseloads. Judges are now overburdened. They are exhausted. They are nearly worn out, and they are in some cases burned out, end of quote. Undoubtedly, Justice Cummings felt compelled to remind the executive, and I quote again, "We do not need a rhetoric. We need more laborers. We need the judges. We've been hearing time and time again about the JSC soon to be established. We would like to see the implementation and the establishment of the Judicial Service Commission." Mr. Speaker, as an officer of the court and a member of this House, and my fellow colleague, Honorable Member Anil Nandalal, Senior Counsel, he ought to be advised, and I do advise him, to render proper advice to the President, to ensure that the executive honors its obligations to the judicature. All are aware that justice delayed is denied, and the morale of the members of the judiciary is tied to the employment stability and the proper conditions under which they dispense justice. Mr. Speaker, a review of the budget disclosed that all the essential characteristics of the Dutch disease, it certainly discloses it, Mr. Speaker. None other than Mr. Geoffrey De Silva, a PPPC comrade, has waved the red flag in our faces. He identifies the manifestation of the Dutch disease in 4 spheres. These are the political, financial, economic, and social. The characteristics are its political instability and increase into ethnic rivalry. National institutions are weak, ineffectual, and corrupt. The people have less say in government. The government is over-dependent on oil income for its revenues. There's unrestrained public spending. Crude oil are a very large part of the exports. There's little economic diversification, and the competitiveness of the non-oil sectors, including agriculture and manufacturing, is declining. All types of crime are increasing. Professionals are paid low salaries compared to foreign professionals. The education system produces the wrong graduates, and it is tailored to bureaucracy instead of productive sectors. There's a brain drain, and there's no limit on the foreign number of employees in the country. Political office holders are paid highly, while workers and farmers earn relatively low income. These are the views of their own Geoffrey De Silva. That is exactly the situation in Guyana, Mr. Speaker. The pages in this budget reveal that government's overdependence on oil income, and there's no restraint in public spending. Mr. Speaker, we heard from the Minister of Finance that the major non-oil sectors of the economy are indeed declining. Mr. Speaker, we heard, and the country heard from the Honorable Minister, that crime is increasing. Guyana is now ranked at level 3 by the USA Travel Advisory, which is a message to avoid traveling to Guyana due to the increase of crime. A recent survey indicated Guyanese prefer to migrate than rather to stay here in Guyana. It's my view, Mr. Speaker, we can prevent the ravages of the Dutch disease, but the socio-economic process must change from exclusion to inclusion. This could be sensibly done through Article 13 of the Constitution, which provides the basis for inclusive governance, shared prosperity, peace, and social cohesion. Before I take my leave, Mr. Speaker, it's timely, I believe, to remind this House that Premier Forbes Burnham in 1964 said, "All the people of this country are important, whether they belong to a large group or a small group. The Amerindians are important, the Chinese are important, the Portuguese are important, the Europeans are important, the mixed races are important, the Africans are important, the Indians are important. In short, all Guyanese are important and valued members of our community. We cherish them and consider them, and it is the duty and privilege of government to guard and protect and further the real interests of all." These words, Mr. Speaker, articulate the desire of every Guyanese, and they were more evident on the 26th of May when Minority Leader Dr. Chetty Jagan and Prime Minister Forbes Burnham embraced as a Guyana, embraced a new nation to lay the indigenous foundation of inclusivity, equality, and equity. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, following members of this House, Honorable House, it's being proposed that we do the honorable thing and scrap this budget. together along with the national stakeholders, let us conceptualize a vision for all Guyana and put a spending plan in place to reflect all Guyana, not one Guyana, and return to this honorable House to unanimously approve a national budget that secures the rights and interests and prosperity of all Guyana. I'm sure my colleagues on this side of the House and those on the government side who believe that all Guyanese are important will not oppose a national vision, a national economic plan that is inclusive, which would give hope to all Guyana and the aspirational flame of our founding fathers and mothers for one people, one nation, one destiny. It remains as bright today as it was the dawn of independence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member, Mr. Ford, and completing the morning or the pre-lunch presentations is the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, the Honorable Zulfikar Mustafa. Minister, you may proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I rise to support my colleague and brother with responsibility for finance, the senior minister, and his team for the formulation of a budget that is transformative, dynamic, and comprehensive. Mr. Speaker, this budget will address the socio-economic transformation of our country and continue to fortify the government's One Guyana vision. Mr. Speaker, what was presented by my colleague, Honorable Minister of Finance, is concrete evidence that our government's policy is forward-looking. Mr. Speaker, there can be no doubt that Guyana is positively transforming at breathtaking pace. This rapid development is outpacing our brothers and sisters in the region in some Caribbean countries. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, we have been ranked the second fastest growing economy even without oil in the world. Mr. Speaker, this country is in the international spotlight for good reason and is much sought after investment destination, a far cry from just 2.5 years ago under the coalition when it was classified as a place of doom, gloom, hopelessness, and its people devoid of confidence. Mr. Speaker, this transformation that we are witnessing didn't happen by magic. It took visionary leadership of the People's Progressive Party civic government and the prudent management of the country's resources to make it happen. Mr. Speaker, it took that visionary approach to craft budgets since taking office in 2020 to realize and sustain this unprecedented development. Budgets are the fiscal means to deliver this transformative development for the benefit of all Guyanese. Mr. Speaker, budgets are a means of us delivering on our promises, and we on this side, on the House, are delivering on promises that we went to the Guyanese people with. But Budget 2023 ensures that we will continue to deliver on those promises that we have made. Mr. Speaker, we have witnessed a number of events in our country's history. Since we took government in 2020, we have seen a number of events that took place in our country. And let us imagine for one moment, Mr. Speaker, if the APNU AFC was in office during this time, what would have happened to Guyanese and Guyana? The entire country would have been in serious consequences. But today, Mr. Speaker, when we speak today, the region listens. We have brought back credibility, and we are now leading agriculture in the Caribbean. The entire Caribbean are looking forward to the leadership of His Excellency President Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali. And Mr. Speaker, with that portfolio that our president holds, we have seen a renewed interest in agriculture in the Caribbean. Countries that solely depend on tourism are now moving to transform their economy into the agriculture sector because they see the future in agriculture. We have seen what took place during the last 2.5 years, during the pandemic. We have seen many countries that have large sums of money were unable to procure food for the population. And we in Guyana here are very fortunate because with the prudent management, with the investment that we have created, we have invested, we are able to produce 60% of the food that we are consuming. And Mr. Speaker, I am hearing that my colleagues over there are saying 100%. We will reach there. And when in my speech, I will let them know how we'll be going there because I have a plan, unlike them. I have a plan for the agriculture sector. And Mr. Speaker, they could beat their breath. They could beat their breath, they could beat their chest. But let us don't deny the fact that the non-oil economy performed credibly excellent by performing 11.5% in the GDP. And in that, agriculture contributed almost 9% to our GDP. So they can come with all kinds of statements. They can come with all kinds of untruth. They can come with all kinds of misinformation. That doesn't deny the fact that our country economic growth, especially in the agriculture sector, was excellent. Mr. Speaker, as I said, we have seen the energetic leadership on the regional front by our president. We are seeing that our president is leading the charge to reduce the food import bill of CARICOM by 25% in 2025. Guyana was the first country in CARICOM that hosted a successful agri-investment and expo last year, May. And with that, we have seen many investors and financiers coming to Guyana to invest in the agriculture sector. Mr. Speaker, the special ministerial task force that was set up by the heads of government, who is leading that? Yours truly is the chair of the ministerial task force of CARICOM. Guyana is leading that. Guyana is leading that charge. That showed how the CARICOM countries are looking to Guyana. That showed the confidence that Guyana now is experiencing, Guyana now is enjoying by our CARICOM brothers and sisters. Mr. Speaker, I might have to change my prepared speech because of certain misinformation that was brought to this House. And yesterday, Mr. Speaker, we heard the honorable member, as a matter of fact, the first day of the budget speech, I heard the honorable member, Ms. Amanza Walter Desir, said that we have destroyed the sugar industry. She doesn't know about sugar. Probably she knows about sugar to drink in her coffee or tea. The honorable member, Kemraj Ramjatan, said we destroy the sugar industry. And that has been the mantra of the APNU AFC. Mr. Speaker, when you look at what took place under the APNU AFC, when you look at Ramjatan's right size, what are you talking about, honorable member? Mr. Speaker, he seems to have some problems. He seems to have some problems with I will get the facts just now. I will have the facts. But Mr. Speaker, Mr. Ramjatan went to WIM. Honorable member, Mr. Ramjatan went to the WIM rally, told the sugar workers there that the sugar industry is ingrained in Berbice economy, that the sugar industry is important for the for Region 6. As a result of that, they will not close any in any factory, and they will increase the workers' salary by 20%. That is the minister or Mr. Ramjatan said. Mr. Speaker, as I said, we have seen what happened and who destroyed this industry. Mr. Speaker, I want to say in 2014, listen to this, in 2014, when we left government, Gaisuco was producing 216,352 metric tons.
Honorable member, just give me a moment. Honorable members, we had 3 presentations that everyone gave a certain modicum of respect. And clearly, the Minister of Agriculture is exciting a lot of attention to himself. Please allow him the courtesies that the other members had this morning.
So, Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, that in 2014, when we left government, the industry was producing 216,352 metric tons. It moved from 216,352 metric tons in 2014 to 92,256 metric tons in 2019. Mr. Speaker, in 2016, or 2015, Mr. Speaker, Skeldon Estate produced 39,157 metric tons. Mr. Speaker, in 2016, Skeldon Estate produces 31,782 metric tons. They went to the parliament. The former member then, the AFC leader, Honorable Chapman, boasted that they have turned around the industry and sugar will prosper. Mr. Speaker, in 20...
Our post program. Welcome this. We're into the afternoon session. We haven't the Parliament has not taken their lunch break as yet. Of course, you're seeing there on the floor. You had Zulfikar Mustafa doing his presentation. The Minister of Agriculture, of course, rattled by a lot of the information put out there by Vince Roy Jordan earlier this morning.
And Walt is here because he mentioned a few other MPs that he's claiming he's trying to correct. But I want to let the audience know before this part is done, hopefully we'll be able to pull up some of those photos that the MP would have shared with us that he talked about earlier in terms of the abattoir and the machinery. So I'll find it very hard for him to refute those in a few.
But before we get to that, of course, yesterday, last evening, ending off the session for the opposition side, we had MP Maureen Philadelphia on the floor. Of course, we didn't get a chance to speak with her yesterday, as we promised. As when we were going yesterday, we'll talk to her today, and we have her. We're happy to have her here with us to join the program. MP, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Randy, and thanks for having me.
Right. Thank you very much for being here. We want to, of course, give you an opportunity to kind of break down your presentation. Maybe you can even talk about things that you didn't get a chance to include. But before that, we are asking all the MPs to give us your general analysis, your general characterization of Budget 2023.
Like I said before, thank you, Randy. I do believe Budget 2023 is a travesty. It's the largest, of course, $71.9 billion. And when we look at its construct and delivery, it did not cater for the small man. What I would have seen when I did some analysis is concrete and mortar. What do I mean when I say concrete and mortar? For them, development is infrastructure. Nothing is there to cushion what I refer to as the Olympic cost of living. And so while they may say that salaries are increased by 8%, the fact of the matter is when we go into the shops, goods and commodities prices are far higher than the meager increase they provide to us.
Yep.
And so truth be told, what was given in the budget is not a people-centered budget once again. After 4 years, and I dare say, in this oil-rich Republic of Guyana.
Right. This, falls in line with a lot of the other characterizations that we're getting of Budget 2023. You, of course, are the MP representing, one of the MPs representing region number 4, and specifically the East Coast. Am I correct?
Yes,
yes. And so I'll give an opportunity to speak at some of the issues coming out of your geographic area and, kind of unpack some of the things that you presented yesterday.
All right, before I go specifically to East Coast, I want to hinge on a presentation. The budget theme was improving life today, building prosperity for tomorrow. How appalling is that when a mere 10 days before its presentation, the Mucka Caneview family lives were disrupted. And as a result of that action, in excess of 50 persons were made homeless. And you know what was most troubling to me? The fact that Miss Ellis, a data entry clerk, stood in defense of her home as any human will do. She was nailed to the cross. And so the PPPC uncaring government would have made her both homeless and jobless. And my heart went out further because a 2-year-old toddler is affected by that vindictive act. And so I call on them to ensure that when you speak of equity and equality and you talk about improving life today, it should mean that in all aspects.
Yes.
And so while I turn my attention now to region number 4, East Coast specifically, it was quite worrying to know that on the 5th of September last, we've had a freak storm that destroyed the homes of 5 families in the Beirut area. Randy, you would have visited. And of course, we have put something out there which is referred to the life of the Beirut people. And so I would want to call on Guyanese to look at that. And so when we visited, we put the information out there to give person understanding as to how those persons were affected. And I'm happy to know as a Guyanese that the head of state would have gotten mail, of course, who, for those of us who are Christian-minded, understand that they are the head of the family and they must take their responsibility serious. And so he would have formed a group, and they're going all around the country looking at necessitous cases and finding means of assisting them. But today, Men on Mission has not visited Beirut. In fact, what was provided to the residents there were about 20 zinc sheets, I think some amount of detergent and food hamper. And so they were basically saying to them, you've lost your home, go and wipe your tears, go and clean your sorrow. That is why they give them those cleaning detergent. And so if I would have lost everything, one of the residents said to us, look at this, I ain't got nothing left. I was able to save all my monies. It's only December. I was able to put together my home, complete my home. And you know, when you listen to that, it caused your heart to want to ask several questions, which only you yourself can answer. Because we continue to see the discriminatory practice of the PPP, regardless of what is being said. And then they're touting One Guyana. And so I want to put that out there in a nutshell. As we walk over to Dazel, as we walk over to Dazel, we met a young couple. The mother is huge pregnancy with 2 under school age children. What was left of that family is just the floor. They pooled whatever little they had to start a life for the young family. And when you're gonna talk about caring and giving and reach and touch, these are persons that you should touch their hands to. What they should do is not to put drag line on our back or put their knees on our back, or the PPP have their knees on our neck, but to ensure that every hand that need a silver touch is given that.
Yep.
Now, I also touched on education because in 2022, $74.9 billion was allocated to education, where it is said that they're entering into world-class education. And I want to unpack that a little. I'm at an institution, and I can tell you, we have not had adequate textbooks for our babies to use the entire last year. I was so concerned, how do we deliver effectively with this shortage? I'm speaking from my experience, all right? And I'll come back to that. Yesterday, I heard the Minister of Education, Honorable Priyamani Chand, said, we give on the breakfast program so many schools, she provided listing, but none was given to Mocha. But what she did not say, the government coalition, of course, could not have given breakfast to Mocha when an organization has already catered for that area. And so the government had no need to give. She further said that if they run out of a mayonnaise, they have to travel all the way to Georgetown to get one. That's a farce, because I headed an institution that we had a kitchen there, and I must let you know, Randy, that the persons that managed the kitchen were parents of students or learners from the entire district, meaning Lusignan area. And so parents were employed. And I can tell you, they had a regional coordinator, but there were never a time when we were out of stock. There were never a time when we were out of stock. And so I thought of dealing with that because some of the inaccuracies spoke about yesterday, opportunity did not lend itself for me to delve into. Again, another inaccuracy yesterday. As the minister continued her presentation, she said, APNU AFC did not build any new schools. But when she was cautioned, she said secondary school. But what I want to get at, Randy, in 2021, my budget presentation, I asked the Honorable Minister if some of these monies that are spent here will be used to complete Good Hope Secondary School on the East Coast. And I was told emphatically there are several building defects. And so hearing those words, I concluded that that's a project that had to be abandoned because of it may have been threat to lives and limbs. But now 4 years later, 3 years later, from this $94.4 billion, they're allocating monies to complete that institution that the minister said then had building defects. And I want to make it clear that that's one of the buildings or the institution that APNU AFC started. But because of their wicked and vindictiveness, they refused to complete that school. And you know what? Some of the students that were allocated space at that school are treated like stepchildren at the other institution when they're only given the 4 core subjects to do. And these are things that the ministers of government should look at rather than stuck their head in the mole and try to pretend as if everything is good. It is not. It is not, Randy.
You clearly hammered in a lot of
Yes,
the,
quite a lot
especially
of fact there.
giving rebuttals, because what we're seeing every time we go to the speeches coming from the government, they are filled with so many stories, and every time an MP sits in this chair, we have to go through the process of dealing with what you can't say in Parliament, the lies that are being spread. And I'm happy that you were able to clear up some of those. You talked about that school and the issues, of course, the humanitarian issues that we're seeing, because that's what I would call it. And I mean, we're signed down to so many things, what we see happening, the help that is not being given to the persons in Dazel, in Beirut, what happened to the persons in Mocha, and you're seeing them across the country. We had that individual who went to social media to give comparison of the program you just talked about, where the president would have launched Men on a Mission. And I'm happy that you're calling them out, go visit these places, because this is something that has been pending for a while, and some of those persons, as you rightfully said, are still suffering because of what has happened. In addition to that piece of information that you would have just given to us, is there any, I know you talked a bit about cost of living, I think, in the start of your budget. I mean, just to hammer it in a little bit more, and I don't think that if it was 40 MPs coming and sit here, we cannot overemphasize the issue of cost of living.
Ms. Haynes, I'm happy that you raised that. And I want to start my response on an important footing. As a member of Parliament representing the people of this nation, we were thrown in an uncomfortable and unfortunate situation. 8 of us were suspended. We were not paid for 6 months. Of course, we had our families to take care of and everything that goes with it. And so, looking at what has happened, it caused you to become mathematicians and economists. And when you receive that meager sum, I'll go to my teacher now, who said to me, HM, my salary is only $76,000. I spoke of her before. I have to travel all the way from Anns Grove to go to Georgetown. I have 2 children. One is going to secondary and the other is at primary. I have to pay rent. I have to pay transportation costs, not to mention the other amenities that comes with that, light bill, telephone bill, because we're talking world-class education, we're talking e-learning, we're talking technology and all of these things. And then we have the schools, the teachers are sending information home, and so the parent has to get themselves involved. So we have to cater for the internet cost and all of these things. And so when she spoke with me, I looked at her and said, my God, you're only one of the many. And so I couldn't give the kind of comfort she need. And that happened because she know that I'm a member of parliament and she's basically looking for representation. And so when you look at what was provided, like I said before, they care less about the small man. And so I heard her a couple of days ago. I met her on the road and we were talking. I said, my teacher, not my present staff, of course, a former. And she said to me, HM, I didn't have anything to give my children to go to school today.
Wow.
I didn't have anything to give my children to go to school today. I collected $500 yesterday and I give my big son that. The bus that I used to go to work with, I use that and I pay at the end of the month.
Wow.
And so if we want to be real, in excess of 50% of our population live paycheck after paycheck. I would have gone to the market a few mornings ago, $200 for a pound of potato. Not to mention during the Christmas season, a pound of celery was $1,500.
Correct.
A bag of carrots, $1,000. The eggs that you used to bake with at this time of the year, you pay $800 and $900 a tray. Then you have to pay $1,800 and $2,000. I want to know if these persons that sit to decide who gets what and how much they get, because that is politics, if they do the real calculation to understand how people are suffering. And the suffering is real. The suffering is real. That will only change when the coalition get back to power. We treat persons with dignity and respect. Over a period of 3 years, we consistently raise wages and salaries. In addition to that, they talk about tax exemption, but it must be known that they are the ones that instituted tax, not the coalition.
At 16%?
Of course. We have not instituted tax. You would have spoken to me about the cost of living, but I want to touch a little on infrastructural development in region number 4 on the East Coast.
Go ahead.
Be it known, 6211 line item is the council's budget, which the regional chair managed. In the year 2022, the regional chair would have requested $26 million, 26.230. He was only given 18.25. That department could not have provided what was needed. Could not.
Yeah.
It was woefully inadequate. This year, 2023, he requested 36.
36, yes.
What was allocated is 26. And while you find they continuously starve 6211 of financial resources, they ensure that the other agencies at central government do the bidding. And so infrastructural development is done through public infrastructure and regional development. And when these projects are being done, they single out specific communities.
Yeah, we were just
I am
talking
sorry
about-
that I don't have the photographs here to show you, but I will give you a few villages on the East Coast. Victoria West Sideline is in a very, very bad state. But I'm happy I saw it on the budget to be done this year. Victoria East Sideline, it's atrocious. And the picture or photograph, one of that I would have showed yesterday, I took one where the lamp post for the electricity is falling into the trench. So to give the honorable ministers an understanding of them doing their work and doing it proper. There's a village that I refer to as Pothole Sioux. That village, a road, sorry, I refer to as Pothole Sioux. I refer to the village as the land of the forgotten, and this village is Nabaklis. None of the road works there is worthy, no, not one. The bridges, they are very, very bad, deplorable. And you know what's funny? Minister Zulfikar would frequently visit that area to speak with the farmers. He's not ashamed to use the very road. And he couldn't say to his colleagues, come on, you have put something there for Nabaklis. But when you speak, they want to tell you these languages, these words are unparliamentary. But the facts must be given. The facts must be given. Adjoining that village, Nabaklis, is a village by the name of Covanjon. And there's a stretch of road just between Guyana Women's Leadership Institute and the Covanjon Police Station that house only 2 families.
The road was done.
2 families. And the dictator, or Dharamlal, the dictator Dharamlal, I'm going to call my own words.
We are in parliament.
Give instruction for that road to be given priority above a road or a community that has in excess of 6,000 families.
Yes. Yep.
In excess of 6,000 families. This is sad. A resident of Buxton died last Sunday. I'm told when she fell ill, they tried to get taxi to bring her out. But because of the condition of the road, nobody wants to go. By the time the paramedics meet there, she was a dead woman. I would have highlighted some of the streets in Buxton too.
Yeah.
And what I want to say, why they discriminate these areas, they ensure that places like Monrepo, Lusignan, Enterprise, and more, just to name a few.
They're doing back roads.
They're doing the roads that APNU would have done over the period. They're doing them back. And you know what? They're giving these contracts to friends, families, and favorites.
Yep.
And while they're doing that to ensure that their friends are good or taken care of financially, these projects fall apart quickly.
Definitely. MP, we're happy that you're bringing to the fore these issues, because a lot of times people sit and they listen and, you don't get specifics. We're happy that you're calling out these street names, these villages, that these things are happening. I want to, as we get ready to wrap up, we take a look at what's happening there. We're still seeing the Minister of Agriculture on the floor. So as we wrap up with this section, I know that, as you said, you spoke to education also. We've seen all of what is happening in education. We see the schools being destroyed. We see children in tents. We see parents fighting teachers. We see, it's a whole melting pot of confusion. As we end this section, what are some of the things you would like to see in the education sector as we move forward? Because I think 20% of this budget went to education, and you just counted, how many billions last year. How do we move forward?
Randy, there are social problems. We cannot alleviate what is happening in the school without first understanding the root cause. And the root cause are those social problems. Truth be told, years back, we've had what I love to refer to as ideal families. Today, the home is run by the mother 90% of the times, because it's either the father is absent because of work, his place of employ, or the father is just not there. We no longer have families that sit to the table Sunday morning to have breakfast and share family ideals and values. And so those positives are not spilling out or into the society. And then we have the institution where our children or students or learners attend with the understanding that they are given that guidance. It is not happening. Under the coalition, we would have provided counseling and all of that. I know in the budget, a huge sum would have gone to having persons referred to as guidance and counselors in institution. But we need to ensure that that aspect of things work. We have to start treating our students with respect. We have to talk to them properly, stop talking down to them and calling them names. And as I say that, Randy, I remember having a discussion with you some years ago, some mornings ago, and you spoke to me about an incident you faced with growing up. And I can say to you, it exists today, where teachers say to children a lot of demeaning things. And so, you know, Christians say, words have molding power. And when you're going to speak to me in that form, I will only give you what you ask me for. I will only give you the way you treat me. And so we have to see these young adults as budding leaders and ensure that we deal with them the way they ought to be dealt with. It means, therefore, that if we are going to ensure that we continue with guidance and counseling, we have to ensure that we put competent people in position, all right, to deal with these things. And that caused me to want to touch on something. What is happening now? Teachers are taken out of the classrooms to hold senior position at the Ministry of Education without having any requisite qualifications and competencies. And so in order for us to change things, we have to stop doing that. We have to cease allowing the word that says nepotism to be the order of the day. And so all they're doing is to ensure that they keep the mill turning, but they have no time to understand what are the ingredients being used to keep the mill turning. And so when you employ a strategy today, you have to evaluate so as to understand how effective is this, which will guide you as to how you need to change and what new strategies need to be employed. But all we have is old wine in new bottles or new wine in old bottle. And like I close my presentation yesterday, I remind us of the words of the reggae legend Buju Banton. Untold stories. And sometimes we need to take time out to listen to the lyrics of these songs, and it will cause you to understand we are in dark days. And like Guyanese will say, Guyana could never be a real place.
On that note, we will take our leave. We want to thank the MP for coming and unpacking all of those issues that she will have presented in our budget, and even more valuable information. As I'm following the viewers here, they say your points are well taken. Facts. One of the comments on the social media, on Facebook. Folks, thank you very much, MP. Thank you very much for sharing.
Welcome back to Parliament.
Yes, welcome back.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much.
Right. Folks, we are going to leave you now because we see that it's adjourned for the day. Well, not adjourned. It is
they're at lunch.
Suspended for lunch. And so we'll take our leave now. We're supposed to have some programming coming on in the lunch break program. Let's stay tuned for that. When it comes on, you can share the live stream. You can also share this live stream with all the persons who are coming later. They can see this. And we will be back after lunch.
Have a good afternoon. In the meantime,
enjoy the rest of your lunch.